Andy Warhol was one of the most famous and controversial artists of the 20th century. Known for his bold pop art paintings of soup cans, celebrities, and consumer culture, he lived a life that was always in the spotlight. Yet behind the colorful images, Warhol's personal life was filled with pain, fear, and secrets. Toward the end of his life, he created a sketchbook that contained drawings unlike anything he had made before. His assistants later revealed that one page was so disturbing and personal that they decided to cover it completely in black ink. The page had nothing to do with the glamorous world of Hollywood or the consumer images that made him famous. Instead, it revealed the deep fear that haunted him for decades, the reason he dreaded hospitals, and why a simple surgery later took his life. This mystery page was hidden from the world, but when we look at Warhol's life, we begin to see how it all makes sense. His childhood illnesses, the death of his father, and the scars left by violence all built up into a story of an artist who was always struggling with his body, even while he was shaping the culture of modern art. Andy Warhol was born as Andrew Warhol on August 6, 1928, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His parents, Andrei and Julia, had immigrated from Slovakia, hoping to find a better life in America. But instead of comfort, they found themselves in a small apartment with very little money. His father worked long hours in mines and construction, coming home covered in dirt and exhaustion. His mother did everything she could to support the family, from sewing and cleaning to praying every day for strength. Their life was one of constant struggle, moving from one poor neighborhood to another, surrounded by other immigrant families trying to survive. Andy wore old clothes handed down from his brothers Paul and John, and often there was not enough food for everyone. The turning point came in 1936 when Andy, just 8 years old, became seriously ill with Sydenham's chorea, a disease that made his body shake uncontrollably. He had to stay in bed for months, missing school and losing his hair, his skin turning pale. Other children bullied him for looking weak and different. But during those long hours in bed, his mother brought him magazines filled with pictures of Hollywood stars. Andy began to draw them, cutting out faces and creating collages. His tiny kitchen table became his first art studio. While his illness isolated him, it also opened the door to his creativity, teaching him to escape into imagination when his body failed him. When Andy was only 13 years old, tragedy struck again. His father, who had been working in West Virginia, died after drinking contaminated water. The illness worsened because of a past surgery, and he soon passed away from tuberculosis peritonitis. According to family tradition, his body was laid out in their small living room for 3 days. The young Andy was so frightened that he hid and could not even look at his father's face. The loss devastated him, and life became even harder for his family. To help, Andy and his brother Paul began selling fruits and vegetables door to door, while Andy also offered sketches of people on the street for a few cents. They had no money for formal art lessons, so he took mail-in courses and practiced at home. At school, he faced constant bullying for his pale skin, soft voice, and unusual looks. The pain of being mocked stayed with him all his life, and he even had surgery on his nose later on to try to change his appearance. But instead of letting this rejection destroy him, Andy transformed it into something powerful. In the 1960s, he dyed his hair silver, wore wigs and scarves, and created a striking public image that no one could ignore. What had once been a weakness became his armor. The boy who was bullied for being different turned into an artist who made being different his greatest strength. By the time Andy Warhol graduated from Carnegie Institute of Technology in 1949, he had already developed a unique approach to art. He moved to New York City with little money in his pocket, but a burning desire to succeed. At first, he worked as a commercial illustrator, designing shoe ads and magazine spreads. His drawings were clean, stylish, and unlike anything else in the advertising world. This work paid his rent, but it wasn't enough for him. Andy wanted more than to be an illustrator. He wanted to become a real artist, someone whose work would be remembered. That opportunity came in the 1960s, when he embraced the growing pop art movement. Instead of painting traditional subjects, Warhol turned everyday consumer products into icons. A Campbell soup can, a Coca-Cola bottle, or a Brillo box, ordinary things that people saw daily, suddenly became works of art. His art was shocking to many critics at first. How could a can of soup belong in a museum? But Warhol argued that consumer goods were just as much a part of modern life as landscapes or portraits. His bold vision made him a star, not just in the art world but in popular culture. Soon, his studio, famously called The Factory, became a gathering place for celebrities, musicians, and artists of every kind. Andy had created not just art, but an entire lifestyle, one that blurred the line between reality and performance. But behind the fame and success, Andy Warhol carried deep wounds that never healed. In 1968, an event occurred that changed his life forever. A radical feminist writer named Valerie Solanas, who had once been close to Warhol, arrived at his studio and shot him at close range. The attack nearly killed him. Doctors said his heart stopped beating, and he was clinically dead for a short time before being revived. He underwent hours of surgery, and the bullet wounds left him with severe internal damage. His chest was so scarred that he had to wear a surgical corset for the rest of his life just to stand upright. From that moment on, Warhol lived in constant fear. He became obsessed with death, hospitals, and the fragility of his own body. His art reflected this shift, with more work centered on car crashes, electric chairs, and images of celebrities who had died tragically, like Marilyn Monroe. Friends noticed that even though he appeared calm on the outside, he was always haunted by anxiety. He became more withdrawn, suspicious, and guarded, hiding his pain beneath his wigs and eccentric fashion. This shooting not only left him scarred physically, but also psychologically, reinforcing his lifelong fear of medical procedures and hospitals. It planted the seed for the tragic end that would come years later. Toward the end of his life, Andy Warhol began keeping a sketchbook that was different from his earlier work. This was not filled with the bright commercial images that made him famous. Instead, it contained deeply personal drawings, expressions of his inner fears and memories. Assistants who later went through the book noticed one page that shocked them so much, they chose to cover it entirely in black ink. To this day, the exact drawing is not fully known, but those who saw it described it as dark and unsettling. Many believe it reflected Warhol's greatest fear: death in a hospital bed, surrounded by doctors and machines he did not trust. His childhood illnesses, the trauma of his father's death, and the scars of the 1968 shooting had all built up into this lifelong terror. This sketchbook was not made for the public. It was almost like a diary, a place where Warhol released thoughts he could never express in interviews or in the bright, flashy art he sold to collectors. For a man who controlled his image so carefully, this private page was the one place where he allowed his fears to show. The fact that it was later hidden in black ink only adds to the mystery. Was it too disturbing to reveal? Or was it simply too personal for the world to see? Whatever the truth, this page remains one of the most haunting symbols of Warhol's inner struggle. In February 1987, Andy Warhol went into the hospital for what was supposed to be a routine surgery to remove his gallbladder. Friends said he had delayed the procedure for years because of his fear of hospitals. When he finally agreed, it was only after being told the operation was minor and safe. But for Warhol, nothing about hospitals ever felt safe. His body was already weak from years of health problems, and the scars from the 1968 shooting had left him fragile. After the surgery, doctors initially said he was recovering well. But on the night of February 22nd, Warhol suddenly died in his hospital bed. Officially, the cause was listed as cardiac arrhythmia, an irregular heartbeat that stopped his heart. But many close to him believed the hospital had failed to monitor him properly. Some claimed his deep fear of medical treatment had been justified all along. For a man who had lived through so much suffering and carried so many fears about death, it was cruelly fitting that he died in the very place he dreaded most. His funeral was held at St. John Chrysostom Byzantine Catholic Church in Pittsburgh, attended by hundreds of mourners, including family, friends, and celebrities. Yet even in death, Warhol remained surrounded by mystery, just as he had been in life. Today, Andy Warhol is remembered as one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. His works hang in major museums around the world, and his ideas about celebrity, consumerism, and art continue to shape culture. But beyond the colorful images of soup cans and movie stars, his story is also one of pain, survival, and vulnerability. The hidden sketchbook page serves as a reminder that even the most glamorous figures often carry private fears the world never sees. For Warhol, the fear of hospitals and the trauma of his past were so strong that they became part of his final art. His life teaches us that behind every image of fame and success, there may be unseen struggles. He turned his suffering into creativity, transforming his differences into power. But at the same time, he remained a man scarred by illness, loss, and violence. The mystery of the blacked-out page keeps his story alive, inviting us to wonder what secrets he left behind. In the end, Andy Warhol was not just an artist who painted the world around him. He was a man who painted his fears, even if he hid them from view. That haunting mystery is what makes his story timeless. Andy Warhol became rich and famous, but fame never brought him peace. Instead, it added new layers of complexity to his life. On one hand, he loved being surrounded by celebrities, models, and musicians. His studio, The Factory, was always filled with people who wanted to be near him. For many, Warhol himself was a star. photographed constantly with his silver wig, dark sunglasses, and mysterious expression. But behind that public image, he remained surprisingly quiet and insecure. Friends often said he avoided deep conversations, answering questions with short phrases like, "Oh, I don't know," or "That's so nice." Some thought he was being clever, turning his shyness into a performance. Others believed he truly struggled with opening up. Warhol also had a complicated relationship with money. He once said, "Making money is art, and good business is the best art." For him, selling art was not separate from creating it. It was part of the process. Critics accused him of being shallow, but Warhol seemed to enjoy blurring the line between art and commerce. The contradiction was always there. A man who appeared glamorous but lived with fear. An artist who seemed distant but poured his inner struggles into hidden sketches and private thoughts. Despite being surrounded by people, Warhol often felt lonely. He had close friendships with some celebrities, including Lou Reed, Mick Jagger, and Liza Minnelli. But even these relationships sometimes felt more like performances than genuine connections. His private life, especially his romantic relationships, remained mysterious. Warhol rarely spoke openly about his sexuality, though many assumed he was gay. Some of his art clearly celebrated male beauty, yet he often avoided public discussion of his personal life. Those who worked closely with him described him as both affectionate and distant, someone who craved attention but also feared intimacy. Perhaps this came from his difficult childhood, his father's death, and years of being bullied. His silver wig and carefully constructed public image became a kind of shield, protecting him from the vulnerability of being truly known. Even as he became one of the most photographed men in the world, he hid behind his silence and masks. This loneliness showed up in his work too. Many of his paintings of celebrities captured not just their glamour, but also their emptiness. He understood that fame often hid pain, because he felt the same way himself. After Warhol's death in 1987, his influence only grew stronger. The Andy Warhol Museum opened in Pittsburgh in 1994, becoming the largest museum in the United States dedicated to a single artist. His paintings sell for millions of dollars at auctions, and new generations continue to study his work. What makes him timeless is not just the style of his art, but the questions it raises. When he painted Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, or Jackie Kennedy, he wasn't only celebrating them. Andy Warhol was one of the most famous and controversial artists of the 20th century. Known for his bold pop art paintings of soup cans, celebrities, and consumer culture, he lived a life that was always in the spotlight. Yet behind the colorful images, Warhol's personal life was filled with pain, fear, and secrets. Toward the end of his life, he created a sketchbook that contained drawings unlike anything he had made before. His assistants later revealed that one page was so disturbing and personal that they decided to cover it completely in black ink. The page had nothing to do with the glamorous world of Hollywood or the consumer images that made him famous. Instead, it revealed the deep fear that haunted him for decades, the reason he dreaded hospitals, and why a simple surgery later took his life. This mystery page was hidden from the world, but when we look at Warhol's life, we begin to see how it all makes sense. His childhood illnesses, the death of his father, and the scars left by violence all built up into a story of an artist who was always struggling with his body, even while he was shaping the culture of modern art. Andy Warhol was born as Andrew Warhol on August 6, 1928, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His parents, Andrei and Julia, had immigrated from Slovakia, hoping to find a better life in America. But instead of comfort, they found themselves in a small apartment with very little money. His father worked long hours in mines and construction, coming home covered in dirt and exhaustion. His mother did everything she could to support the family, from sewing and cleaning to praying every day for strength. Their life was one of constant struggle, moving from one poor neighborhood to another, surrounded